Well, is that it? Have we seen the moment pass when it might have happened? Let's hope not. Houlihan. Inviting is there! Robbie Brady brings us all to our feet in Lille. No more than Ireland deserve. A fantastic goal to put Ireland in front. Now, just 6 minutes remain. And Lille sees Lyon on the horizon.
Hello and welcome back to the Football Talent Show. It's been a little while since you guys have heard from me and also heard from the co-hosts alongside me. Jacek, how are we doing today?
Hey Adam, it's great to be back.
Yeah, it's been a little while since me and Jacek have been on the podcast together. It's not been a little while since me and Jacek have seen each other because we're actually working in club football together again. And it also means a little bit for the podcast that it is a bit more difficult to get these out on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, but we don't want to give it up. We want to make sure that we're still pumping out high quality content, whether that be on a monthly basis, every 3 weeks or so. We want to ensure that the quality of the content stays high above all else.
We will still try to do at least one episode every month. But yeah, as Adam mentioned, we are back to club football, and it's quite tight. We work hard, and but yeah, we will still try to deliver at least once a month some quality content for you guys.
Yeah, like Jacek said, it's not all just rambling about football that we do in the podcast. When we work for clubs, we have to be a little bit more tight and professional than we are on this podcast here. But we have a really special one to almost kick off this little restart. Today, we're joined by Bill from Irish Blog. He's an excellent guest all about Irish football. So, Bill, pleasure to have you alongside us.
Thanks for having me on. Thrilled to be here.
And we'll get right into things, Bill. And as we ask all of our guests, your first football memory. So it doesn't even necessarily have to be an Irish football memory, but just the first football memory in general.
Yeah, I suppose I grew up being I was kind of a Manchester United fan, to be honest. But in terms of Ireland, I suppose the first rain I could properly remember was Trapattoni from 2006, 2010, I think. While I've always been an advocate and someone who spoke highly of Irish football, I think even then we underachieved because we had the likes of Damien Duff, Robbie Keane, John O'Shea. We had good players, and I personally don't think Trapattoni was the right manager because I watched us struggle against San Marino, get hammered by Cyprus, get wronged by a handball and Henry. So it hasn't been a very happy time. But I'm optimistic. I think the next time we qualify for an international tournament, we'll be a lot more competitive. I know we qualified in 2016 under Martin O'Neill and Roy Keane, but I think that was in spite of the management rather than because of it.
And Jesse, we speak a lot about your fortunes as a Poland fan, but could you ever say we were hammered by Cyprus? Have things ever gotten that bad?
Yeah, Adam, I think we were beaten by Cyprus in the 90s. I can be mistaken, but yeah, we surely struggled. But the 90s was the dark era of Polish football, so we were able to lose to anybody. Like, I remember the game against San Marino, we won like 10 minutes before the end. We scored with the hand. So it was a clean handball, but yeah, we won 1-0. So yeah, the 90s were the darkest age. Well, it's not like we are thriving right now, but yeah, 90s were absolutely awful.
And I think the Polish always ties in well a little bit to our episode today also because we're talking about a nation who maybe is rising out of a dark age. Bill, would you go as far as to say that Irish football is kind of on the rise after some really troubling years?
I really do think in the coming years now we will have a proper team. I know we'll touch on a lot of the talents coming through at the moment later on in the episode, but yeah, I'm optimistic. I'm always optimistic.
And I think today we also got to not just talk about the national team, but take a lot of time to also look at how the domestic Irish football landscape has changed, because I think that's where we're seeing almost the biggest developments. I mean, the League of Ireland is a really exciting prospect at the moment, even for talent scouts like ourselves, but we don't need to go too far back. where the league of Ireland was really almost a disaster for Irish football, and it was one of the least respected leagues in all of Europe. 2014, the former Irish Football Association chief executive John Delaney even said about his own league that it's the difficult child of Irish football. So, Bill, talk us through maybe what has changed so much in only one decade to see kind of the domestic Irish league really rising again.
Yeah, look, I think I coined the phrase recently enough that the problem child has become the golden child. Amidst the struggles of our international team, I think more people have looked to League of Ireland and seen that we have to take a proper, genuine interest in the League of Ireland if we're going to have a strong national team. Look, there's been disillusionment with the modern game, I suppose. Copious amounts of money, self-centered elite footballers. I think what the League of Ireland brings is a rising talents, live football, and a community atmosphere. I was looking back on a comment there that I posted there about 12 months ago, and I think this perfectly encapsulates it. He goes, "I'm from Germany and love the Irish League. It feels like a good old classic and VAR-free football of my youth, which nowadays you usually can't find in a semi-professional or amateur leagues. But with passionate crowds, lots of local derbies, and a great compact league structure, it's easy to follow, with just 10 games per game day in total for both tiers. So I agree with Damien Duff. The Irish League is the best league in the world." So I think that kind of encapsulates it. I think you're really getting the outside interest now because it's getting the further coverage. We have League of Ireland TV, so you can spend €100 and get all games live for the year, which is incredible value. And I think that's helping us rise in profile in the international market, we'll say.
Yeah, and let's be honest here. I remember the Irish League like 15, 20 years ago, and it was like semi-amateur. Even, these early stages of European qualifications. Irish teams were were among the easiest ones, even for Polish teams. So yeah, Irish team, okay, we just need to beat them. We need to play these two games and go through. And the progress in the past, I would say, decade was immense. These days you can have players that are playing in the League of Ireland, and they can go straight to championship, for example, which is a great level, and actually get minutes. For example, Marco Mahoney, I will take just one simple example of Marco Mahoney. So 2 years ago he was still in Ireland, and right now he's getting some serious minutes in the championship. So these youngsters are more and more ready for fully professional top level football. And like 15 years ago, these youngsters would come to England and they would struggle a lot. They would need to learn. It would be a whole different world for them. And these days, thanks to the level of the league, but also of the youth developments, it's getting better and better.
Yeah, I can only agree, and we'll talk a lot about the youth development also in Ireland, because I think that's an even more fascinating topic than the domestic league itself. But just staying with the domestic league for one more moment here, we speak a lot about how COVID impacted football and how it's really changed the landscape. And I'd almost argue that COVID has in some ways really helped Irish football, because I think we're seeing a lot of people be more drawn to their local clubs because of COVID. And we're seeing, for example, Irish fans no longer necessarily say, okay, I go over to the Premier League where ticket prices are increasing all the time. Fans are more and more just commodities for clubs. And I instead really support my local football club. And we're seeing that also reflected in the numbers. I mean, if you just look at the raw data, 1 million people came through the turnstiles last season for the 2024 campaign in Ireland, which is the most ever. And then when the new season kicked off just a few weeks ago, there was 33,208 fans attending the Bohemians versus Shamrock game. That's the biggest attendance in Irish League history. So, Jacek, you were talking about this amateur level football that you were watching just a decade ago, and now there's 33,000 people in attendance, and the level on the pitch is also increasing year for year. So, Bill, as someone who's more so boots on the ground than either I or Jacek, would you go along with the fact that perhaps COVID has really almost drawn an even greater tie between the fans and the clubs in Ireland?
I think so because COVID was obviously a difficult time for clubs and it brought its own problems. But in terms of just speaking Irish football perspective, the League of Ireland TV, which I spoke about, that was originally brought into because of COVID, so people could watch all the games for good value. If COVID never happened, would we have a situation where we could have over 100 live games for less than €1 a game? I don't think so. As I said, I'm a United fan. I actually don't see the problem with people supporting English teams as well if they want to. But what I try to say to people who come from outside the league and are Irish, why don't you support both? League of Ireland football is primarily on Friday nights. The Premier League is maybe Saturdays and Sundays mainly. Like, it's not either or. I think anyone who takes a pride in our international team and stuff, they should be really investing into the League of Ireland too and support it, because I can't agree with someone who, if they criticise the Irish international team and they call it shit or not good enough thing, and then they don't go and support the League of Ireland, or they're not there every week, or they're off to Liverpool every weekend. I just can't understand that, because it's where all our players come from. It's the bedrock of Irish football, whether people like it or not. It always will be. And with Brexit, it's going to become even more important. So, yeah, look, I think it's important that we try and support our domestic league. That doesn't mean that we have to not support the English league or support teams from abroad. Fine, we love football, let's do that. But, we should really be supporting our domestic league too.
Definitely. And as we mentioned, that the level increased a lot. Like right now, for example, if you're a St. Pat's fan, you can go to a stadium and see Mason Malia, a guy who will move to the Premier League. So you can actually watch some serious talents and some serious players, which was probably not the case like 15 and 20 years ago.
Yeah, and then let's maybe go into the level of the league itself. So, Bill, we've kind of spoken about the subject a little bit so far, but when we dive deeper, what is the level of the League of Ireland? Where would you compare it to, maybe in the English pyramid or just wider European football in general?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to ascertain due to scalability, but I think the main problem is lack of financial incentives. The prize money in the Premier Division for the winners is 125,000. If you win our national cup, the FAI Cup, you get 32,000. Like, that's where the problem comes, and that's why it's hard to judge the scale of the teams or the ability of the teams. But I would say the top four in the Premier Division, compared to England, because it's just the easiest example from my perspective, would be Upper League Two, Lower League One. The middle would be Lower League Two, I'd say, and the bottom half would be like the National League. The first division, which is something is of a lower standard, but I think it doesn't get as much attention as it should. If you have a standout talent, a young player under the age of 21, playing well in the first division, you have yourself a player there. Like, you really do. That might be to be a regular at the top tier Premier Division, or go on to play in England. Like, you see the likes of Jake O'Brien and like Mark O'Mahony, they all got their starts playing in the first division. So it's a really good league for young players, and we'll touch on it later. But you see Premier Division teams now, they're getting bigger contracts, they're tying down players, which is great. Right now, the first division is actually, it's a really open market, because an awful lot of teams are amateur or semi-professional, so they're not tied to these big contracts. They're still playing at a relatively high standard, and there's some top talent there. Yeah, look, it comes down to finances. It will be a lot higher if we had proper finances, and that's a serious issue going forward.
Yeah, those prize monies for the cup and the league, they're pretty crazy, honestly, when you consider how it is around all of Europe, not just the Premier League, but even some other modest sized leagues in Europe. And I think that almost goes back to when we speak about revenue generation. We'll speak about it obviously through kind of the youth development aspect of sides later on, which is a great revenue generator. Jacek, you mentioned Mason Malia, and moving him for 1.9 million when you get 32,000 euros only for winning the cup. Yeah, it shows that you need to get money in different ways. And one of the big ones then is, how can you compete in European competitions? I mean, we saw this season, for example, with the run that Shamrock Rovers had, going in the Conference League and also making it to that preliminary knockout stage, only to go out to Molde in penalty shootouts. But that's obviously a great source of revenue for these clubs. So how do you think Irish clubs also fare in these international competitions? And you think that we'll also see a steady improvement there, with more and more clubs making it to the Europa League and Conference League more consistently?
Just on the Conference League, if you're eliminated in the first round, you get €150,000. which is already more than the league prize money. So I think we do very well. We saw Shamrock Rovers run there now, only just finished up a few months ago. But I think we do very well with the money that we have being invested. But I think if you look forward to this coming summer, we will really see better performances in Europe, because we have a Shelbourne side managed by Damien Duff, who's, I think, an incredible young manager. He really does love the League of Ireland, and I'd kind of compare him to a young Jose Mourinho. You have Stephen Kenny back at Pats. It didn't work out for him in Ireland, but his record at League of Ireland level speaks for itself. He's top class manager. You have Stephen Bradley, who up until last year got into 4 years in a row. So a lot of it's coming down to the managerial teams, and the players themselves deserve immense credit. But I think Shamrock Rovers run, what it does for us now is it improved our coefficient position. And I always say that I support Irish clubs in Europe, all of them, even if I don't like them, because we're not in a position as a country where we can stop ourselves from getting good coefficient points, which will help with the draws. If we got to the standard of the Scottish League, and I think we could, maybe then we could say, I don't like Bohemians, or I don't like Cork City, I want them knocked out in the first round. But at this point in time, it's really small time thinking if we're going to want our teams to be knocked out, because it's not good for the overall picture of Irish football.
Don't you guys think, especially you, Bill, that this lack of money is also a good thing in some way? That you guys are forced to play so many young players. For example, we mentioned Shamrock Rovers. Michael Noonan became the youngest goal scorer ever in a UEFA group competition game. And I think, yeah, that with more money, maybe these players wouldn't be getting so many chances as yeah, you would be able to buy some older players. But right now, I would say the Irish league is probably one of the youngest in Europe.
Yeah, look, I think there's no solutions, there are only trade-offs. That's one of my favourite lines. With a lack of investment or a lack of financing from our association, we have to look at external ways of managing our funds, and I think that's really why we see a broader trend of youth development in the league. We'll say the younger the players are, we'll say under 21s, the cheaper contracts they have to be on, maybe not even a non-professional contract. Then if you can get them up to a certain level and certain experience, by the time they turn 20, 21, 22, maybe then you can get a fee for them. It's the only way that we can make the league more sustainable in the long term.
Yeah, and I think one of the most interesting aspects, of course, when we talked about clubs having to focus a lot on their homegrown development, means also that the recruitment strategy you have is slightly different, maybe. And yeah, that's something also interesting to look at in terms of the Irish First Division. What are kind of the pathways and avenues that clubs like to look down when they're looking for external recruitment?
Yeah, I think you've seen this wage inflation in the league now, relative to what it was at. You see teams that aren't in the European positions, like the Bohemians, paying up to €2,000 and €3,000 a week for their players. I think a lot of that's because of the work going on in the background. In the 2023, there was a minimum wage brought in. Part-time players could get up to pay €22,000, €360 a year, but the SRI estimated that the average player wage in Ireland was €41,000 per year, so it's relatively pittance in comparison to, let's say, you have first-year pros at United and would say €30,000 a week. Damien Duff last year claimed that a person with a lot of experience in the league costs up to €1,200 a week, so €62,000 per year. And I think Duff, that's why you're seeing an awful lot of focus on domestic talent. So if you look at the 24-25 arrivals into the Premier Division, you had Premier Division players being bought, League 2, Free Agent, First Division, League 1, SPL. Those were the top 4 or 5 leagues or backgrounds that players are coming from. So it really is looking at the lower leagues of England, and you have a splintering of Scottish market that's been used quite a bit. The US and Canada is also ones that we could probably arguably look into more, but there are teams with strategies that look differently. Like you had Athlone, they look at the Caribbean market a lot. They're bringing the likes of Franzi Perot, brother of Franzi Perot at AEK Athens. Within 18 months, he was at Strada, and now he's gone abroad. I can't think where he's gone. But it's about looking at alternative markets, and I think we should be looking at the African market, markets like that where you can get players in on trial for low wages, and there's a very high talent base. But It's probably very concentrated at the moment towards the Irish domestic market in the UK, but I can see that broadening out in the coming years.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one to follow. It's often with these smaller leads that your opportunity to gain value over competitors is so high because the markets that clubs are looking in is so limited. I mean, we see it in Latvia and in the Baltics in general, for example, with a lot more clubs now looking towards the African market, trying to make partnerships with clubs in Gambia or clubs throughout Nigeria to try and get a filtering of talent every single year. So there's always these big opportunities to quickly gain this advantage over your rivals, but the money is very limited for recruitment departments. For the money is very limited for kind of these long-term initiatives a lot of the time. So it's always kind of weighing those costs and benefits, but it will be definitely interesting to keep a look on.
Honestly, I'm really happy with the state of Irish football at this point. And I probably mentioned it 50 times in this podcast that money is helpful, very helpful, but money can sometimes ruin even some of the best projects. And in my opinion, right now, Ireland is becoming more and more popular because all of these homegrown talents and yeah, we can see in Scotland, like these days, nobody is really interested in football, in Scottish football. Because of that, there are very few homegrown talents. There are some weird signings, and in Ireland, it's so natural at this point. All these 17-year-olds, 16-year-olds getting minutes in senior football. You can even see, like recently, I have watched Ireland under 17s, and you have players from Venezia, from Club Brugge, of course, from England. So this has become a scouting paradise, even. And in my opinion, Ireland is surely one of the top three most underrated countries to scout in Europe at this point.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think it's easy to go to the fans and say, hey, support your local clubs, but then it's also on you as the club to bring them local homegrown talents that really represent them. And I think that's where Ireland is also proving their worth. Bill, let's quickly go to the competitive landscape in the League of Ireland. You mentioned briefly at the beginning of the show kind of how it's split between the top clubs being more towards League One level versus the bottom and mid table being more towards the national leagues. But in general, I think one of the biggest talking points about the League of Ireland is just how many different clubs have competed for the title over the last decade or so. I looked at the research myself, and 10 different clubs have won the title in the last 12 years, which, coming from a fan of German football, is paradise that I don't think I'll ever see again. So, is there a real competitiveness within the pyramid, or do you think that's also starting to change now that some of these bigger clubs within Dublin are getting more of the transfer fees and more of those European money to really fuel success?
Yeah, look, I think the League of Ireland is a very competitive league. I know I mentioned about the quality difference, but really anyone could beat anyone on any given day. And I think that's a nice throwback to kind of competitive football. Whereas now in Scotland, you see Celtic or Rangers dominate, Bayern dominate in Germany. Football's becoming less competitive at the top end of things, but that isn't really the case in Ireland. I take Drogheda, a team who I really like how they conduct their business. Last year they were favourites for relegation. They avoided relegation in the final day of the season, but they also won the FAI Cup. This year they're top of the Premier Division and they're overcoming the odds. Their budget is still one of the smallest in the league, but it just goes to show that we have a really competitive league. And I think while the ceiling has probably fallen in recent years, the top teams are probably a bit worse. The floor has also risen, so it makes for a really competitive league. And I can see that continuing in years to come, even with the European money coming in. I think what Irish teams are really good at is finding ways of making the best of their situations.
Yeah, and one thing, just doing some research for the show, one of the things that I came across as kind of a counter argument to the lead of Ireland is rising is have the impression that it's not the lead of Ireland necessarily, but the Dublin clubs that are improving and basically making the major strides forward. Would you go along with that and say that there's some truth to that? Or do you think no, the entire league and the entirety of Irish football is actually improving?
Yeah, look, I think there's always going to be kind of a domestic kind of concentration towards Dublin. It's only natural. It's our capital city. It hosts the 1 million, which is a large proportion of our population. You have Shamrock Rovers won 4 years in a row and Shelburne won last year, but Cork City are now back in the Premier Division. I want to talk about them later on in the podcast. With like the Sligo Rovers running a good ship, Derry City. We have a new third tier coming in 2026, hopefully, which will allow for more teams and more geographic balance coming into the country. There is a little bit of Dublin dominance, but I think that's only natural. I think the big cities do dominate the big countries' leagues. I think that's natural. I am confident enough that the league is competitive with like Cork City, Drogheda. Dundalk were very successful for years. They were allowed one of the smallest counties in Ireland, so I wouldn't buy into that, to be honest.
And I think this competitiveness also bring fans to the stadiums. Like, okay, I will mention Scotland once again. I remember in our Q&A, someone asked us if we see a brighter future for Ireland or Scotland, and of course, my answer was Ireland. And yeah, like in Scotland, you have these two clubs, and I think the old firm. This is what brought some fans to watch Scottish football, but people are bored, and in Ireland, you have this four, five, six, seven clubs, and yeah, it's really interesting, you know. And I think the dominance of one club is always bad for league.
Yeah, and we've been very, very positive so far for the trajectory of Irish football. But let's also maybe touch on a few of the limiting factors. And one of them that you instantly come across is the infrastructure. I think a lot of people have gripes about the facilities and stadiums in Ireland, and we are seeing improvements. For example, Bohemians, their new stadium is expected to be completed in 2028 with a 50 million euro rebuild, and Shamrock Rovers as well just recently opened up a new stand for 11 million. So there is heavy investment into rebuilding this aging infrastructure. But it is a big, big factor when we talk about how reliant Ireland is also on local attendance and getting people through the turnstiles. So where do you see this necessarily going in the future? And in general, what else are kind of your biggest limiting factors you think for Ireland to combat in the next few years?
Yeah, it's a serious issue. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm generally positive about all things Irish football. The facilities leave a lot to be desired. Look, I know we now see Daly Park being redevelopment, but if you look at the teams in this country, Shamrock Rovers, Tala has a lovely stadium. They have some decent facilities. After that, it leaves that to the desired. Turner's Cross should be one of the leading grounds. It hosts Ireland under 21 matches, but like that's dilapidated too. The toilets are disgrace. And when we were talking about bringing in new supporters and teams into the league, if the facilities aren't right, families aren't going to go there. Like the Bohemian development is great, but the element in itself I think it has a capacity limit. It can only be increased so much, so it's going to be only about 10,000. If Irish football was to go where I think it could go, even that wouldn't be enough for a team of Bohemian stature. So it's really an issue. I know we're starting to see government giving funds, so we are starting to see improvements in the league, but it's really slow. It's not. And my biggest problem with this is if there isn't demand, like we have sellouts now, and people want to go to Irish football, but if we can't satisfy the demand, people are going to go off to other sports. They'll go to GA, they'll go to rugby, where they can satisfy the demand. Then we'll be losing potentially new fans to the sport, and it'll be holding back our progress. I think it doesn't have to be like huge stadiums because we don't have the population, but just like good, high quality stadiums with good surfaces, good facilities that won't detract people away. There's a lot of things, funding from the government, it's improving, but it's slow. Clubs are having to look at outside methods, looking at like sponsorship deals with local pubs, companies, fundraising literally by selling raffle tickets. Like that's how it's being improved in this country, and it's really really slow. I am concerned about that, and that we won't be able to satisfy the demand in time.
Yes, and with the progress of Irish football and especially youth football, there will be more money in Ireland because more and more players will go abroad for higher fees, like as we mentioned, Mason Malia, but there will be more, hopefully more Malias, and I'm quite sure that there will be because I follow youth football and I'm really happy to see what's happening these days in Ireland. And I really hope that this money, like for example for Melina and the others, will go to invest into youth development facilities rather than bringing some mercenaries from abroad. I really hope that this money, at least in 80%, will be invested in facilities.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. We're producing a high enough standard of player in our domestic academies. I think the most important thing is the facilities and next and foremost.
And this is what makes the Irish League so special. These homegrown talents and this highly progressing development league. This is what will bring people in, and not some weird transfers from abroad for high fees.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the perfect segue almost to our section about the domestic football and the youth level. And when we look at Irish football now going down to who's producing the talents, what would you say are necessarily the top producers of talent in the country? What are the academies that are really going above and beyond to bring the next generation of Ireland forward?
Yeah, I think my answer here might surprise people. Three I go with St. Pat's. You've made Familia, Sam Curtis, the likes. Adam Murphy went to Bristol City recently. Two Shamrock Rovers. I think they are the best resourced academy in the country. They're the most innovative. They are the standard bearers in a lot of things in Irish football. But to be honest, the number one academy I think in the country is, and I'll argue this to the death, is Cork City. They will be my local club. Look at their current squad now. You've Cathal O'Sullivan. He's poised for a big move in the summer. David Dunn. He's been on trial with Red Saucy lad. You've Jaden Umeh, Joel O'Brien Whitmarsh, Jake O'Brien at Everton, Matthew Moore, Mark O'Mahony, Franco Uma, Cathal Heffernan, and even in League Ireland itself, you have Josh Honahan, who was recently called into Ireland squad, or he was actually he was on the preliminary squad. I think Cork City stand above the rest in terms of development of Irish players. I know Shamrock Rovers kind of had the more flashy type of names, but for consistency throughout the years, even if you look in the past decade, no matter who's in charge of the club, whether it's gone through fan ownership, it has a new owner now recently, it's consistently brought through players, and that's my favourite thing about the club, to be honest.
Yeah, and when we speak about Court City in our second half of the show, we're gonna have a few talents from Court City's academy. So it just goes to show what a fantastic producer of talent they are. But I also want to go a little bit deeper into your number two pitch, Shamrock Rovers. Specifically, you mentioned they're the most innovative academy. So when we speak about being innovative as an academy for Shamrock, what is it necessarily that they do that's so different to some of the other academies?
Yeah, I think the biggest problem, and Damon Duff spoke about it a few years ago when he's working in punditry, is players in the side, they don't kick a ball enough. They're not getting enough coaching hours, which it kind of exacerbates the difference as they develop between the ages of 17 and 21 between innate talent and learned talent. But what Shamrock Rovers did, and I think it's the best example recently, is they reclassified their academy as a childcare service last October. Essentially, for every player they train, is classified as childcare, and they're going to receive a certain amount of funding every year because of that. I think it's an amount up to six figures. It depends on how much hours they do, but they're getting up to €2 for each hour that a boy or girl is coached, which sounds small in the grand scheme of things when you look at the scalability in terms of the Premier League. But like, it's stuff like that that really sets Shamrock Rovers apart. By doing that, they can increase their contact hours. They're getting more of a return from that. They can get the players in and playing more often. For example, Shamrock Rovers had Damien Duff as their under-17 coach. He had them in at doing 6:30 in the morning sessions before school, after school. He really tried to drive home the kind of standards and the work ethic required. And I think if you look at that on Shamrock Rovers under-17 team now, I can't think to my head a lot of names, but one of them is Sinclair Armstrong, who's now on to be Bristol City. I think he'll be a top striker for Ireland now, but it's really about finding ways to get as many contact hours into our players as possible and getting a return on that. Even if it's small, at least it's something, and it further incentivizes players to get further coaching. It might seem mundane when you compare it to like United and City and Barcelona, but it really will help make a difference, I think, in the long term.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Bill. Well, I have my own list of my favorite Irish teams to scout, but of course, I'm I'm not an insider like you, and you know way more than me. So my list, of course, it begins with Cork City. It's only because of the number of players that I have scouted there in the past 4 or 5 years. And the second place would be St. Pat's. I think I saw not only Mason Malia, but also Curtis Brothers and some others. And yeah, the third would be definitely Plymouth Rovers and then Bohemians. I think these are the four teams that I have watched the most. Well, the players from these teams that I have watched the most in the past 3 4 years.
Yeah, I think I agree with those four. I'm not a Bohemian supporter now, so I don't like giving them credit, but yeah, they run a good ship too.
And another thing we always like to talk about on the Football Town show is that it's not just about developing the talent, but it's also about creating the pipeline and the pathway to also present these players in the first team. And so when we look at maybe those four clubs we just mentioned, Bohemian, St. Pat's, Shamrock, and Cork, who do you think is doing the best job of also creating that path into first team minutes?
Look, it has to be Cork City. I think I gave those top three. I think that will be my top three for giving players minutes too. I think what sets these academies apart, of course, there's high quality coaches. There is very high quality coaches in the country. There is good scouting, but what really sets us apart is because we have no facilities in comparison to the likes of most top tier clubs. It's our philosophy. There's an underlying commitment to promoting and bringing through young players, especially with Cork City. Look at the players there that I mentioned there recently: Marco Manny, Frank Umeh, Jaden Umeh, Colin Sullivan. There's a conveyor belt of talent coming through. The facilities are borderline non-existent, and yet they continue to produce these players. It's actually astonishing, to be honest, and I can only put that down. It's a philosophy, it's a commitment from. If you look at Liam Carney, who's the head of youth development, I think now at the club, a former player. It's a philosophy and it's a really commitment to bring through young players. It's not. There's no facilities. There's absolutely no facilities. The coaching is strong, but it's probably not good enough standard. So it's literally just a philosophy. If you compare that with like with Crystal Palace, in abroad, like where I've seen a lot of Irish players go to the likes of Jacob Bryden, Franco Uma, they have a Superdome. I saw a video of their new facilities there a year ago or so, and it was unbelievable. It's only something we could dream of in this country. It sounds so mundane and stupid, but it's an underlying philosophy and commitment to bring through young players. I think that's what really sets us apart.
And then I think it's also impossible to not speak about the other pathway for Irish talent, which is also to go abroad. And I think one of the big things that has changed in recent years is also how Brexit has changed this pathway. In the past, we saw most of the Irish talents make early teenage moves to England. We look at guys like Evan Ferguson, Damien Duff as well, who we mentioned, going way back, Robbie Keane as well. They all left Ireland as teenagers for top academies in England. But now through Brexit, it's becoming increasingly difficult to do this, and different pathways have opened with Ireland being ever more integrated into the European landscape. We're seeing now players pop up from Ireland all across the continent, whether it be in Como, whether it be in Hoffenheim, or wherever it may be. So, do you think that this Brexit change has been a good thing for Irish football, or has it been a negative? What is your perception on this change?
Yeah, look, I think there's positive and negatives with it, but it's made the clubs try to get their houses in order and try and provide the most professional experience they can for players if they're not going to move abroad earlier in their careers. Like, I'll just give you 3 or 4 examples. Cork City under 19s beat Tottenham under 18s 1-0. Mikey Moore played in that game for Tottenham. Shamrock Rovers under 15s beat Burnley's Academy 7-1. Shamrock Rovers under 14s won the Hale Cup, beating Leicester, Tottenham, City, Villa, and Arsenal. So we can bring through these young players. But it's about finding solutions, and I think our league is becoming increasingly younger. There's a general trend towards youth development. We're going to increase our domestic talent base, which will increase the standard of the league. Problems with that is our players can get as much coaching as they're required to do so to develop. I'm not so sure. Shamrock Rovers are looking at ways to do that, as I mentioned. The biggest problem will be getting our players as much coaching hours as possible and trying to give them the facilities or to replicate some of the experiences that they have abroad and the facilities on the budgets we have, which is not going to be ideal. But it's important that we find solutions because these players need to find ways of development. Irish people love to talk down on the English route, but I tell you what, the English route is not to be dismissed. They're the best facilities in the world. It's a tough slog, but if you get through it, you have a real chance. Whereas I think if you see players going to like Italy now, I'm not convinced Italy is a good place for young Irish players. They don't really bring through the young players. I think an awful lot of the agents are attracted to the big signing on fees, and I just like to see more players not going to Italy. To be honest, I think you saw Kyle Heffernan go there from Cork City to AC Milan originally. He's now at Newcastle. He's far better off in Newcastle than he ever was at AC Milan. I think these players are more than good enough. They really are more than good enough, but they're just not getting their proper chances. And people say that we aren't getting the chances in the UK, but Italy and life aren't any better. So it's about finding the correct routes for our players that will foster their development if and when they move on.
Kind of like this diversity right now. So this Irish players going to Portugal, Italy. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of young players going to Italy, it also shows that what's kind of a country in terms of football Ireland became. Like we have Benfica scouts going to Cork City to watch a player, and I think it's like the biggest testament for the progress that Irish football has made in the past years. But I still think the perfect way would be the Mason Malia way. So breakthrough in an Irish club at a very young age, and then go abroad, and at the same time giving your club and the academy funds to keep going and keep improving.
Yeah, that's for me. I think the Mason Melia example, we've mentioned it so many times already, but it's just important to touch on it once more here. I think that's for me the biggest benefit from how Brexit has changed this pathway, because the 1.9 million euro transfer fee, I mean, it more than tripled the previous record of a player from the League of Ireland. And had Brexit not been there, I would have been completely convinced that he would have moved way earlier to a British academy for a fraction of that fee. And the fact that there is Brexit in place means that he was able to stay at St. Pat's much longer than he would have before, and then also got into a stage where the fee that St. Pat's can also command rose to such a big price. So that's for me one of the big benefits. But it's also only a matter of time before European markets like in Italy, like in Portugal, who are already going aggressively into Ireland, become even more aware and go even younger. And then it's about, okay, what can we do as Ireland to convince talents to stay here longer? And what we've seen so far is that the one big benefit they have is the fact that they're integrating them into first team football early. They're getting opportunities, they're getting chances in men's football. And now it's just about bringing those academies up to the standard, bringing the infrastructure and coaching up to the standard where their development also isn't being hindered by staying. I think that's where they still need to improve. And Bill, you've touched on that excellently here. So I think that's something to really look out for in Irish football. How is the grassroots infrastructure and coaching developing in the next 4 to 5 years? That will be key.
Yeah, look, and circling back, I think the League of Ireland is best placed as a developmental league. If I ran a League of Ireland club myself, I basically run it as a de facto under 23 team. Get as many young players at senior games as possible as early as possible. League of Ireland is great at developing young players physically, but technically, that little 5 to 10%, I think, leaves a lot to be desired. Darren McAnthony, who is an Irishman himself, spoke about when he's signing young players. And he's talked about how he wants players up until the age of 19 and 20 to get as many games as possible. And I think the League of Ireland and the Irish leagues allow players to get as close to possible as 100 games at a very young age. And that just gives them a fantastic foundation. If you can do that at between the ages of 17 and 21, you're really setting yourself up well for a positive future in the game. But yeah, that would be my main thing. I like to see the League of Ireland as development league. Of course, you're going to have your 25, 26-year-olds. That would help raise the standard too. But in terms of developing the standards, I'd be like, get young players as many minutes as possible, as young as possible, get their value to the peak point you can, and get them developed, and then sell them on.
Yeah, and in general, I think there's still a lot of work to do in Ireland, as we mentioned, but the future is definitely bright. And as we look forward now, we're recording in the midst of an international break. We're at the very last hours of it, but it's still an international break, you could say. And World Cup qualifying began for many nations. Ireland played Nation League matches instead, but the World Cup qualifiers will begin for Ireland as well very soon, and they have not qualified for World Cup since 2002. So, do you think this development in Irish football could finally see them to return to the biggest stage after what has been over a 2-decade hiatus?
Yeah, look, I touched on it at the beginning of the call. I think when we get to international tournament, we will actually be competitive again. I wouldn't count 2016 as competitive. We embarrassed ourselves in 2012. I know youth football is volatile. I understand that people have different things going on in the background, players' development at different stages, different rates. That's okay. Different players require different things. But what I see with the Irish team now, you have such a volume of talent coming through the under 17, under 19s, under 21 level. We only need a small percentage of them to reach close to their talent, and we'll have a proper team. The last manager, Stephen Kenny, who I would be sympathetic towards, players hadn't been coming through. What that meant was Stephen Kenny himself had to fast track the likes of Adam Ida, Troy Parrott, Jason Knight, Amma Balotelli, Nathan Collins, before maybe they're actually ready. And what that means, they're basically learning the job. Whereas now, if you look at our under 21 group, Mason Million, like they can stay with the under 21s for longer, get their proper grounding in football, and there's no pressure on them to be called up in the senior squad. And I think they'll be more ready then to be proper players for Ireland when they come in. So, because we have the likes of Jason Knight now, Nathan Collins, they're all Gavin Bavoon and Keegan Keller, they're all experienced players. They're all coming to their prime. The likes of between 22 and 27, most of them. That would really help the younger lads coming through because there won't be that big reliance or that huge burden on their shoulders coming through to try and carry the team. And I think that's what will really help us going forward.
Bill, would you call the current generation a golden one?
Yeah, I get criticized. People get criticized about calling that a golden generation because they say we can't compare the likes we have now to Paul McGrath, For My Time, Roy Keane, Damien Duff. I personally would call it a generation, but I think a golden generation is relative. Like a golden generation for Spain is entirely different to a golden generation for Ireland. A golden generation for San Marino is very different to one for, say, Poland. Like we have to compare things on scale. When I say a player is a top class prospect or a really talented footballer, I'm judging him within the context of the Irish national team. I'm not saying that all our players are going to be playing for the big clubs, Inter Milan, United, in coming years. I think a few of them will. I'm confident a few of them will. But we have to judge in terms of golden generation, in terms of the context we're living in. Whether it lives up to its hype depends on what people classify as a golden generation, but I'm confident about our future.
And I think it's also important to recognize the generation that has just passed and also the massive development from the past generation that's just been to the one that's coming through now. I think that's also golden in its own right to have such a big development over such a short time. And just to maybe finish off this first section, the diaspora of Ireland is something we haven't really touched on, but there's just so much talent also born outside of the country and outside of the youth development. In the past, there's obviously the big topics around Jack Grealish and Declan Rice as well going on to represent England. But these topics will continue to pop up. Obviously, Irish players, not just in England, but around the globe, be it a guy like Paul Nebe, for example, in Germany, playing a fantastic season, and many other Irish dual nationals. So how do you think Ireland is on track to also convince some of these players to finally want to represent Ireland again?
Yeah, maybe to a fault, one of my page's biggest gimmicks is bigging up to the diaspora and our talent born outside Irish shores. I do that to the point of annoying people, making jokes about Rice and Grealish. Like, don't get me wrong, I was very angry about their decisions at the time, but as time goes past, I'm like, do I really blame them? I know people weren't happy with the likes of Grealish and Rice, but I can't speak from people's perspectives, and I just think people make these like huge claims that someone should know if they're Irish, someone should know if they're English or not. It's not that simple. It really isn't. You can feel both English and Irish or Irish and American, and you can have ties to both. I think that there's nothing wrong with that. I know players will likely hold out to try and play. In most scenarios, will try to play for the country where they play the highest level of football. I think that's only natural in a sense. But you see with the likes of Rocco Vata now, Kevin Zeffi, the importance of early integration can't be dismissed. I think we should be bringing more eligible talent in earlier, even if we're burned by the likes of Rice and Grealish, because what happens then is you have these players growing up, forming relationships with players throughout the age groups. They learn about playing for Ireland, what it means. They start to foster a sense of belonging about Ireland. I think then you can really get them, the players that mightn't have chosen Ireland in the past, but they really feel Irish now. That's what we have to look at now. And I think with the way the team's going and the domestic talent we're producing, that might be easier to attract players in. But I know the Irish FAI are good at tracking down eligible talent. We've sent players on to them before. More often than not, they know them before we even mention it to them. But look, I think if it goes by case basis, and I would be confident about bringing through these players. People say development or domestic talent. I say why not both? Look at Morocco and how far they got in the 2022 World Cup. They came fourth with a squad almost entirely composed of granite rule talent. Why can't we do that? Or we're a small country. We have more people living abroad than we do on our shores. So I think we have to really do that if we want to move forward.
And Bill, is there any English youngster right now with Irish roots that would be your top player, and you really want him to switch to Ireland? Who would it be? Like an under 19 prospect.
Dennis Cirkin at Sunderland is someone who was born in Dublin to Latvian parents. I think he's someone I would like to see come through, call up the Ireland squad. I think there's been talks before. I'd imagine his first choice would be England, and I even argue that Latvia might be his second choice over Ireland. But I think he'll play at the under 21 championships in summer for England, and we'll see after that. He probably would be my top choice, not because he's the most talented, but he's a position we really need at the moment. The second player I look at is Bellingham. Job has spoken about his future, about wanting to create his own legacy away from Jews, which I can perfectly understand. I think the best way to do that is play for a different national team, set his own standard, and bring Ireland to a World Cup.
I didn't even know that there was an opportunity to bring Joe Bellingham to play for Ireland. Can you imagine Ireland playing versus England? It would be like Ghana versus Germany and brothers Boateng against each other. That would be absolutely awesome. And in my opinion, Joe Bellingham has everything what it takes to be a senior international for Ireland. For England, I'm not that sure, but for Ireland, I think he's a really interesting talent.
Yeah, they'd be my main two. I know we spoke about likes of you could go with Shea Lacey. There's another. I don't think it's attainable. Though his brother did fight in Irish shorts a few years ago, there is an awful lot of underage talent. My article for Jacek a few months back was Tyler Goodrum. He's with Oxford in Championship at the time he was in League One. I think he will make an Ireland squad in the future. We don't need to call up loads of eligible talent. I don't think our squad is in that poor a place where we need to be calling up everyone with Irish blood. We just need the right little players. Liam Delap, I know the rules are set to change again. Technically, he will be eligible for Ireland. I'm not sure if he probably isn't an attainable one again, but there are players there. It's just about finding the right ones, and I have no doubt that we can do so in the future.
Yeah, Liam Delap, Louis Barry, and Joe Bellingham. We're talking about some serious players here. But as we said before, the second half of the show is where we're going into some more talents from Ireland in a little bit more depth. So we'll be back with you just after this little break to talk through the 6 talents we've selected for our U23 Talent Watch. Okay, welcome back to the second half of the show. As mentioned, we've all chosen 2 U23 Irish talents, and I'll say right now, we said U23, but these are some very young boys here. I think our oldest player is born in 2005, So we've really gone on the younger side here, but it just goes to show that the next generation of rising Irish stars is this very, very young, I would say 2006 to 2008 generation primarily. And Bill, as our guest, I think it's only fitting that we start with your player or one of your players. And I'm going to go with 2007 born Kaylem Harnett. He's a 17-year-old Irish talent playing for Wexford FC in the Irish First Division. And the Irish First Division is, of course, the second tier of domestic football. On Transfermarkt, he's actually listed as a right back, but from this season and also last season at Wexford, he's primarily playing in central midfield. This year, he started every game, already with 2 assists to his name. And last season, he played almost 1,000 senior minutes, contributing 4 goals and 1 assist. And let me just remind you again, we're talking about a 17-year-old player with a good amount of experience already in senior football. So very, very remarkable. And like all of our players that we're going to mention, he is an Irish youth international. He has 2 matches for the under 18 section. So, Bill, talk me through a little bit about this player.
I wanted to be a bit outside the box in my thinking. I didn't want to be naming players Amelia and the ones that everyone might know. Kaylem is a terrific talent, I think. He's only 17 years of age, as we mentioned. He's not 18 until May. I think he was the under 17 player of the year maybe 2 years ago. I'm not entirely sure of that. But again, he's hugely versatile. His best position, I would say, is right back, but he's also played centre midfield or right wing, right midfield, anywhere on the right. He's more than capable of doing so. What I mentioned about the first division was it gives young players a good grounding in senior football. And at 17 years of age, he's already 39 senior games, 4 goals and 4 assists. While he played right back last year, we mentioned he's been playing more advanced this season. Attacking midfield predominantly, I think 5 or 6 matches were attacking midfield, but more recently he played centre midfield. But he's just he's a very technical talent. He's a joy to watch. A low centre of gravity, a good crosser, passing range. He's defensively competent from the clips in the matches I've watched. Last December, he went on trial with Brentford, following his outstanding under-17s campaign with Ireland, as well as Wexford. He maybe needs to bulk up a bit. He's still young, 17 years of age. He's only about 5'7", 5'8", so he's not the most imposing of figures. But yeah, I think he has a big future ahead. We've produced right back before. I know he's playing attack midfield for Wexford this year, but I'd like to see him play at right back. I think he could bring more to the team as a right back because he might not be the most physically imposing of players. But yeah, I think he has a big future ahead. And if he's been on trial with Brentford last December, we know Brentford's model and how shrewd Brentford can be. I think that's just a testament to his talent, really.
Bill, my question would be, imagine you are his agent or his father. Where would you see the next step for him? Would it be going abroad or maybe choosing one of the top teams in Ireland?
I think I believe he's under contract. I don't think players like that, even the first division clubs, to be fair, are good at keeping their underage talent on some sort of a contract. Being honest, I don't think his next move will be in the Premier Division in Ireland. I think his next move will be abroad. I think he is ready for that, but I don't have a problem with the English system. But for the right type of player, I don't think he is physically suited to the English Premier League. I think Belgium would be a good league for him, to be honest. I know there's a guy at Union St. Gilles, Chris O'Loughlin, who's originally from Limerick. I think he runs a very good ship there. I think somewhere like that would be good for him, where it'd be a step up in standard, but not so much so. I think he'd still get a substantial amount of game time, and I think that'd be best suited for him right now. I don't see him going to England.
Yeah, I tend to agree as well. I think the physical profile is something that does worry me a lot. He's diminutive, physically slight, and while a lot of those things will improve with age, I think he'll never be your physically compact or dominant fullback. And for me, I like the Dutch pathway the most, to be honest. I think going to a club like AZ or Utrecht and playing in the second team in the Keukenkampioen-Divisie, because let's be honest, I mean, he is an excellent talent and has a big future ahead, but the step from the Irish First Division to any first tier in Europe will be a huge one. It's such a big step, and I think that even going from the Irish first division to the second division in Holland initially, and maybe having some first team integration with AZ or first team integration with Utrecht would be the wisest step. I think that's something that he can master without going too far too early.
Yeah, and I think we've seen how the Dutch League can be positive for the likes of Troy Parrott and Selmo Garcia McNulty. So I would be perfectly fine with him going to the Dutch League too. It would showcase his abilities, and he wouldn't be as physically challenged.
Adam, I think we spent too much time together because really the first club that came to my mind was Utrecht and the pathway of Robert Stein from Estonia. So coming to the Netherlands, to Utrecht, and making a name for himself in the young Utrecht in the second division. So yeah, great minds think alike, Adam.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jacek, I'll let you introduce your Nets player here because he's a player who I also would have happily chosen as well. Let's start with Romeo Akachukwu. He's a player who's born in 2006. He's an 18-year-old Irish midfielder, and he's actually playing for Southampton's U21 outfit right now. Southampton with quite a few Irish players. I would say when it comes to the British clubs, they're one of the best pathways. So Bill, maybe you can even touch a little bit about Southampton's recruitment in Ireland and what makes that so interesting. But back to Akachukwu first. He's a product of the Waterford FC Academy. So not necessarily one of the absolute biggest clubs in Ireland, but it shows that talent is being produced all across the country. He was playing there until the summer of 2024 when he moved to Southampton. And he's even gone on to make his first team debut, or excuse me, not his debut, but his squad debut for Southampton. He was on the bench for an EFL Cup game against Cardiff. So Jacek, a very, very interesting player who, yeah, I'll let you describe in a bit more detail.
Yeah, so first of all, Romeo is an excellent athlete, but he's much more than just physicality. I think his on the ball skills are really interesting. Personally, I compare him to Paul Pogba. His ball striking is something that caught my eye. He comes from this generation, probably my favorite generation so far, which with Natarazi and Mason Melia at the under 17 level, and he was surely among the top five talents from this team. Yeah, let's be honest. Southampton will be getting relegated, and I really hope that it could be beneficial for Romeo because he needs to start playing at a senior level as soon as possible. He's absolutely ready physically and probably technically. So yeah, some minutes in the championship next season, or maybe a loan to a League One club would be highly beneficial for him. But for me, top one level talents for Ireland for sure, you know. So maybe not on the level of Mason Melia, but still one of the brightest prospects Ireland possesses at this moment.
Yeah, Romeo is, I suppose, Waterford. He came from Waterford, which would be, in a sense, Cork City, my local biggest rivals. So he's not too far away from me. He played a huge part for Waterford in 2023. 29 senior games to date. In 2024, I think his contract situation was awkward before he went to Southampton. There was a reluctance from Waterford to play him, maybe because he was moving on and they want to protect the fee. Also, maybe it wasn't in their interest, but he's a very talented lad. I've seen him described as a lad who can effortlessly dictate the tempo and direction looking to play forward at every chance. His ability to shift his body and to create a yard of space and opposition puts in his shadow. I completely agree with that, but I would be concerned again about his lack of senior games. He missed out on basically a year with Waterford because of the contract situation. He went to Southampton now. He's playing Premier League 2. It's okay standard. It's not the best. I think he needs men's football now. And he switched between being an 8 and a 10. I think he needs to shoehorn his position if he's going to move forward. I've seen people say that he'd be brilliant as an 8. I'm not sure he'd have the defensive aptitude or coverage to do so. I think he might be best suited to an advanced 8 position, more so a 10. A bit like Paul Pogba, as Jacek said. But yeah, he's a top talent and he's meant to be a very nice lad with a good attitude, which is extremely important, I'm going to say, coming through. But yeah, I think senior game time will be his main problem. He needs senior games.
Yeah, and for me, that's also why I think even with Southampton's imminent relegation, I think that a loan would be the most beneficial for him. Likely staying in the English pyramid also because I think unlike Bill's pick of Kaylem Harnett, I think that he does have a future that can be in English football. So I think that you want to keep him in the pyramid. And like you guys, I mean, you guys mentioned Paul Pogba. For me, I say Carney Chukwuemeka. So we're kind of on the same page there as well. There's nothing too dissimilar. I really like the fact that you can see this player develop in basically every single one of the midfield positions. He can be a modern holding midfielder, he can be a box to box midfielder, or he can be kind of this advanced kind of number 10 roaming playmaker. So he has qualities to do all three positions, and it just makes him so adaptable to different styles of play, different midfields. He can bring something to balance out your side, regardless of what the other profiles are alongside him. So super modern profile. And who knows, maybe we'll see him and Joe Bellingham alongside each other in an imminent Ireland midfield. That would definitely have me tuning into more games. But I'm going to move on to my player now, who is also a very, very exciting prospect. We've had one 2006, one 2007, and now I'm going to add another 2007 to the mix. I've gone for Ike Orazi. He's a 17-year-old playing for Stade Reims in France, actually, so he's made the step abroad. The vast majority of his minutes have come for the U23 outfit there, but he also has made the first team roster 5 times and even made his Ligue 1 debut against Olympique Lyon in February. And he's a product of the Shamrock Rovers Academy, and he was there until 2023 when he left for Stade Reims. For me, a really, really unique player model for Irish football. He's just got such a unique physical build, likely from his Nigerian roots rather than his Irish roots, if we're being honest. So he's very, very tall, but elegant and mobile. He's got this stature of winger that I really, really love in modern football. And on the ball, he's super creative, has a huge 1v1 dribbling capacity. I recommend anybody to watch his short 25-minute cameo against Germany's U19s in the latest international break because he came on and absolutely changed the game against what is a golden generation of German football with many players who have already made their senior debuts in the Bundesliga or in the second Bundesliga. So that shows the level he has in 1v1 dribblings. I do have the feeling that he still needs to mature a lot. There's a lot of times where he misses the moment to release play or is not necessarily goal driven or vertical enough in his actions. But in general, it's just such a superb talent. And I think it's also a talent that we're currently not seeing that often in the Irish national team's first team, be it because of the fact that a lot of this Nigerian diaspora hasn't come through yet. I think Jacek will get on to a player who can equally compete Orazi for this position in the future. But yeah, it's super exciting to see more of these player models like Orazi, like Akachukwu, and like the one we'll mention in just a few minutes come through in Irish football as well.
Yeah, I think he's a special talent. Someone I know I get an awful lot of information from, and he's tipped him to have an outside chance of making an Ireland senior squad in 2025. That seems like a bold shout, but described him as a potential superstar. Compared him to Rafael Leao, and I think if you watch him, they both like to take on their men. They're relentless. They're technically superb. I think his close control is what I noticed was exceptional. Again, I think we had a dearth of wingers coming through from Ireland for decades. I think now we're seeing the opposite. I think we've an awful lot of wingers coming through, and he's arguably the most exciting of them.
I would say that his passing is also quite decent for a player of this style. Rafael Leao, his playmaking skills, but Orazi was often playing also as an attacking midfielder, and it helped him a lot. Of course, he's a wing player, he's a dribbler, but yeah, I really like that he is not limited like many players of his style. So definitely a top talent. I think he was the third player that I covered on FTS. So the first one was obviously Mason Malia, the second one Nadrazi, and the third one Ike Orazi. So in my opinion, a top talent for Ireland, just like Akachukwu. And the funny thing is that we've covered like 3 players from this generation. So yeah, we've talked about Mason Malia, who's moving to Tottenham, but then I mentioned Nadrazi, who's in Italy, and now Ike Orazi was in France. And I think if we would do this episode like 10 years ago, all 3 would be already in England somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, yes, and I'm happy you mentioned the passing because I failed to mention it myself, and also his in-swinging crossing. He has such a delicate ability to find the back post. It's really, really excellent. And something for you as well as kind of the global football towns down on the show today. The move to Stade Rem, what is your opinion on that? Because I obviously like it a lot, but I also have my reservations because Ike Orazi is basically going to the country that produces Ike Orazis in bucket loads. And he's going from basically being one of the most unique profiles in Irish football or even in British football for that sense to really the land of Ike Orazi. So yeah, I have a little bit of reservations about the fact that if he'll really make it through there or if he'll be just another fish in a big, big pond of fish like him.
Yeah, definitely. France, as you said, is the land of Ikorazis, but I think he has the quality to still be an outstanding talent, even in France. My only reservation is that, yeah, Stade Reims, let's be honest, it's not the best developer of talent in France. So I don't think the direction is wrong. Maybe the club is not the best one, but yeah, he has all what it takes to break through in France.
Yeah, I'd echo that. I think we spoke throughout about players having the right environment to come through. I think the French league is the right environment for Orazi. We spoke about how competitive it is and how there is a lot of players of similar profile, but it means that it gives him a good founding. Like if he can make it at that level, he has a very bright future. And I think the French clubs aren't afraid to develop them, get them to their senior games, and then move them on. So maybe his long term future isn't in France. I don't know. Maybe he could find himself back closer to England or the UK because I think Irish people have a predisposition to doing so. But I'm confident wherever he ends up that he will have a bright future.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we said, I mean, he's already been involved in many first team rosters, has already made his first minutes in Ligue 1. So the signs are promising that Stade also see a big future for him. But Bill, let's move on to your second talent, Joe O'Brien Whitmarsh. He's a 2005 born player, making him 19 years old. Central midfielder. He's currently playing for Accrington Stanley in League Two, but he's actually another player from Southampton. So he's on loan from Southampton there. He joined Accrington this January and has had a really, really brilliant start since joining. 3 goals in 7 games and just a lot of attacking production for the side. He's a product of the Cork City Academy, so I guess we now know why Bill has selected him also. He was playing there until January 2024, and even for Southampton, he's already making some early steps. He made the matchday squad for one Premier League fixture this season against Chelsea, so he looks to be in their plans. So, Bill, talk to me a little bit about him.
Yeah, Joe is a supreme talent. He made his Cork City debut on the 10th of April 2023 at 17, which was his first senior start, which was even remarkable that he'd made the senior team at that point because he spent a long time, part of his early career, out with injuries. I can't remember what the injury was exactly. It was an ACL or a broken leg or something, but he was out for more than a year. As a 14 or 15-year-old, he'd been on trial at the likes of West Ham, Preston. I think he has an English parent, so the move over to Brexit wasn't going to affect him, if that makes sense. But what I will say is, look, he's 35 senior games now. He's on loan at Accrington Stanley, 3 goals in 7 games. I believe he could have gotten a move maybe to a higher standard, maybe League One. But I think the loan move came late for him, and that's why he ended up at Accrington. But he's still young, and it mightn't have been the worst decision for him because he's coming to a standard that he's clearly capable of doing so and becoming an important player for Accrington Stanley. With Southampton relegating next year, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets his first team opportunity. When he signed for Southampton, I said, mark my words, he'll make his senior debut in 6 months. He did it in 7, which wasn't far off. But I think he's versatile. He initially broke through as an attack midfielder, but I think he's more of a natural centre fielder. He's played defensive midfield, centre forward, right back. He's technical. He can progress the ball, whether that's through passing, through the lines, or dribbling. I think he's a more rounded kind of physical presence, and unlike Romeo, who might be more technically talented player, Joe has gotten that senior game time. Joe played a season for Cork City before he moved on. now he's gotten the move to Accrington. He's getting those senior minutes, and I think that's what will set him apart from Romeo, yeah, at least in the short term. Because he's getting those minutes. You just watch him; he's a very classy footballer, and we're really lacking that kind of midfielder who can do it all for Ireland.
Yeah, absolutely, Bill. For me, I really value the physical components from him, but for me, it's even the technical aspects that I like more. I really love his creative passing, his ability to make killer through balls through lines, and like you say, also the ball carrying ability he can carry through very, very long phases. So exactly the two capacities you want as a central midfielder. Also very two-footed as well, and like we said, he has a tall frame but not necessarily the most robust one, but therefore he's still very, very mobile for his size. So yeah, there's a lot of modern attributes to his game. And as we mentioned, I think that I could see him already playing at the League One level. But I also think for what is only a 6-month loan now to Accrington Stanley until the end of the season, there's nothing wrong with ensuring you're in an environment where you're the star man in midfield. You're going to get minutes every single week at senior level. So it's just getting a lot of minutes under his belt to then, who knows, maybe even be an option for the championship next season if he has a very good preseason with Southampton and can really impress. Because I think, to be honest, he maybe doesn't have the higher ceiling than Jacek's pick Akachukwu, but I think he has the better ability to adapt next season already to championship football. I think he is further ahead, which is also okay. I mean, he's a year older as well.
Yeah, definitely. In my opinion, yeah, Akachukwu has a higher ceiling, but I can still see him becoming at least a very solid championship player, or maybe even make it to the Premier League. So another interesting prospect. I haven't watched him that much, but from what I have seen, he's another above average prospect for Ireland, I would say. And I think we should mention it as well. Ireland is also about quantity, because in every country you can have this golden generation. So yeah, 10 players were born at the same time in space of a few years, but for Ireland, it's the quantity also. It's quality, but also quantity. So there are so many interesting prospects. And of course, like you guys know, in youth football, maybe 70% will fail to reach the top level. So that's why every country needs to have a big pool of talents because only a small percentage of them will make it. And I think it's also the strength of Irish football right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think producing one feature Kvaratskhelia is sometimes easier than producing 5 Fabian Ridas, let's say, right? I think it's like you say, the volume is something that's also so impressive about Irish football right now. But yeah, say let's move on to one of your players here who knows, maybe they could be a feature Kvaratskhelia level talent, as he's another super exciting name. Just starting with where he's playing right now, Jaden Umeh, a 17-year-old Irish winger playing for SL Benfica in Portugal. Who would have thought we would be saying that 5 years ago? He's a product of the Cork City Academy, once again reinforcing the fact that they are the number one producer of talent, in our opinion. He was playing there until the summer of 2024. And it's also important to mention that his brother could have also very well featured on this list, Franco Umeh. He's a 20-year-old playing for Crystal Palace. And he's even made the Premier League squad 7 times this season. But back to Jaden Umeh, then Jacek, talk to me a little bit about this guy.
Yeah, so I first watched him when he was 15 and playing probably for Ireland under 16s. And after 10 minutes, I said to myself, this guy can go into any academy in Europe and everybody should be after him. So, an incredible physical profile. He has the potential to become an elite athlete, in my opinion. His top speed is fantastic. Right now, the agility maybe is not there, but his body is still in the development. I watched him a few days ago, actually. So Poland faced Ireland at the under 17 level, and he killed us. He killed us. He scored a brace. He was by far the best player on the pitch, by far the player who was the most ready for senior football. So he can play as a striker. He can play on the left wing. I also compare him a bit to Rafael Leao. So an incredible physical profile. And plus, he's not just physicality, because sometimes in youth football, there are these big guys and they dominate their opponents thanks to their physicality, but there is so much more into his game. And in my opinion, probably top five Irish talents from age of 15 to 20. I would say he's in the top five of these Irish talents right now.
Again, another product of the Cork City Academy. When I judge players, it's in relation to the context of Irish football. But I think with Jaden, it's different. I think he's genuine star quality. It's not just in relation to Irish footballers, it's footballers in general at his age. At 15 years of age, he made his debut for Cork City, and he already looked like a man. 15 years of age, he was a supreme athlete. So when people say that if you have the physical characteristics at youth football that you're dominant, you might be dominating, and people will catch up with you. To show that at 15 years of age, that he went into the senior environment in the first division, so the Irish second tier, and was able to be still physically imposing and still physically stronger than everyone else. That just goes to show what sort of athlete he is. Elite pace, power, his technical ability, his end product. I've even saw someone say Jaden should be fast tracked to the Irish international senior team, similar to Yamal. I think that's very difficult to do. Why he hasn't gotten first few minutes of Benfica, but if he could break into the Benfica team towards the end of the season or at the start of next year, the world is his oyster. I have no problem bringing him in young and bet him into the team, because we talk about players not being ready and allowing players time to develop, unlike before. But I think with Jaden, it's different. He just seems to have that genuine star quality, and I think getting him into the senior environment as soon as quickly wouldn't be bad for his development. I think it would really help him.
Yeah, an exceptional talent, and we alluded to it early, but the fact that Ireland has Jaden Umeh in the 2008 category and Ike Orazi in the 2007 category, both coming through in the same position, is just crazy to think, having that much depth and that much quality in the left wing role. So I'll put it to you two guys as well. Who do you think has the better chances of really cementing their place in that left wing role? Will it be Umeh, or will it be Orazi long term?
In my opinion, Orazi is more of a natural left winger than Umek. I wouldn't be surprised to see Umek develop and going more into the striker position. Of course, it's up to the guys in Benfica. I said that, yeah, he needs to work on his agility, and of course, his body is still in a developing phase. But the way he moves, his footwork, just look at one of the goals that he scored against Poland under 17s. He got past the goalkeeper, got an incredible footwork, left-footed, weaker foot finish. So yeah, I'm really a big fan of this guy, and it's really sad to see his brother struggling these days, because in my opinion, a few years back he was also a top talent, but right now, yeah, playing only for Crystal Palace under 21. So, and he's probably 20 if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, it's really sad to see him not thriving at the moment.
I'd probably favour Uma over Urazi, but that might be just my Cork City boys, to be honest. I've watched a lot more of Uma. He kind of stands out more because I was aware of his brother Franco. But I think it's just great that we have two talents of that level. Again, we're on about we need the volume of players coming through to get the real stars, and to have two players of that level, that young, that would always stand well for Irish football. I think it's a bit harsh on Uma. I think he's on the peripheries of this Palace team. I'd like to see him maybe get a loan to Championship in January. Maybe it'll happen in the summer. But he's a top prospect too. Maybe not on the same level as his younger brother, but we're really starving for talent in the left back situation at the moment. And I know we'll touch on one later, but there is an opening there for Franco on the left hand side if he wants to take it.
As we already mentioned, Orazi, Ume, and his brother, I would just like to mention, and please let's take a short moment to appreciate the Nigerian excellence in Ireland. It's something really amazing that so many players of Nigerian descent are making it in Ireland. So, like Ebosele, Gavin Bazunu, Bosun Lawal, James Abankwa, so many of them. And Bill, I have a small question, personal question, I would say, because in the beginning of the 21st century, many Poles went to Ireland. And it's quite surprising that these days I don't see any Polish name in the youth teams of Ireland. Do you maybe happen to see one of the Polish guys making their way through the Ireland youth system?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because like when I think about it now, there's a large Polish population in Ireland, and it hasn't really translated into any sport really. I can't think of any across the board. I can think of one who's Jacob Goop, I think his name is, but he only played in the second tier in Ireland. It's an interesting one. I'd actually have to look into it. I won't spoof. I don't know. There's no one who immediately comes to mind anyway. I don't know why that is, but it's just one of these anomalies. It's a
Yeah, so well, it's not that I'm surprised, because I'm very critical over Polish football and Polish sports in general. Yeah, it's another knife into my Polish heart.
Yeah, Jacek, it's a huge emigration of Poles into Ireland. Barely a blip on the sporting radar. Another unfortunate one. But let's go back to our true Irish talents here. And we alluded to the fact that this left back position can be something up for grabs in the near future for Ireland. And a player who could definitely, put in a good candidacy for that role is the youngest player, actually, that we're going to profile today, 16-year-old fullback Finn Sherlock. He's playing for the TSG Hoffenheim Academy in Germany, and he's born in 2008, but he's actually playing a category up with the under 19 outfit and absolutely flourishing. And for anybody who doesn't know the TSG Hoffenheim Academy, they are one of the absolute top academies in Germany. They won the league and cup double last season. They're in the final 16 of the UEFA Youth League at the moment. And in general, just an absolute manufacturer of talent. Huge, huge players have come for the academy, and guys like Niklas Sula, Nadia Mamiri, to name just two. And he's a player actually from the Shelbourne FC Academy in Ireland, where he was playing until the summer of 2024. And a true attacking fullback, I would say, gets into attacking zones often with underlaps, with overlaps, with ball carries. A very, very high volume crosser. So whenever he's in wide zones, he's putting the ball into the box. I see a lot of David Rome, honestly, to his game, which isn't surprising. Another TSG Hoffenheim player who made big steps under Sebastian Hoeneß's time there. And also against the ball, a very tenacious and front-footed presser. So he's a fullback who likes to get up the field, likes to attack in a front-footed manner, a very Red Bull style footballer. And I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of his ability to play in a back four in the long-term future. I think the David Raum comparison is also pertinent there. Like Raum, he has some limitations when put under pressure to find the right passes and right solutions. And he's also not the absolute greatest defender or player who has the best defensive technique. But in general, we're talking about a 16-year-old who's adapted so seamlessly to a new environment, new country, and is already playing up in one of the best academies in Germany. So a huge, huge talent.
I mightn't have seen as much of him as I would have liked, but he's a top talent. And I was only reading an article today about the Irish academy structures, and a story about him was before he made the move to England or made the move to Germany. He was in the Shelbourne Academy, as you said, but he was from Cavan, so that's a 2 hour drive, we'll say. So what his school day started was he finished school at 12:30 p.m. He then went on a 2 hour trip to get up to Dublin. Between four and he had his training session with Shelbourne Academy. Then between 4 and 9 p.m. they would have recovery, weights, homework, second pitch sessions, and then at about 10 to 10 he was going home back to Cavan. So he was leaving school at 12:30 p.m. and he wasn't back at home again until 12 p.m. at night. And it started again next day. So we're back to the infrastructure problem again in Ireland. There wasn't the academy or there wasn't infrastructure close by, so he was going up. He had to travel 2 hours to make it. I think that's why the move to Hoffenheim. I can speak about Hoffenheim. I think I've read a lot about their decoding talent initiative and how they use data analytics and how they're really pushing the waivers in varsity football for, I think it's an area of 3,000 people which is minuscule. Like it just goes to show that if solutions and the correct measures are put in place into these small areas, you can make a huge difference on bring through players, and that's what I most like about Finn. To move to Hoffenheim is really going to, I think, fast track his development. I think we go on about players learning the League of Ireland, but I think with him being from Cavan and not located to one of the top academies, I think he made the right decision to go to Germany, to be honest. He might have had to relocate in Ireland to get an even lesser academy experience. So when he was moving abroad, I think it was best that he moved to a top academy like Hoffenheim.
Bill, it was an absolute pleasure having you on here. So much vast knowledge about Irish football and so much vast knowledge which people can also tap into once this podcast is finished. So, Bill, let people know where they can find you and your work.
Yeah, I'm just someone who loves football. I have a passion for working in football and to try and bring on my career. The playing side of things was never going to work out because I didn't make my under 10s team, not to mind any proper level. But again, there's a lot more talented people than I that didn't have a future in football. So it's about finding a new way, and that's what Irish Football Blog is about. You can find our socials, Blog Irish, on X will be our main one. There you'll find the links to our podcasts, our Instagram, and different stuff. So again, if someone wants to talk to me about Irish football, I'm more than happy to do so. I have a passion for Irish football. I want to advance Irish football, and that's what my account is all about.
Excellent. And me and Jacek will also be back very soon with another podcast. We're trying to bring these out at least once a month for the time being. As Jacek mentioned, we're both working in club football again. So time is of a limited luxury at the moment, but we still want to keep these profiles going with interesting and exciting guys like Bill. So Jacek, I'll let you have the final word to sign us off.
Yes, thank you so much, Bill. It was an absolute pleasure, and hopefully we meet soon when Ireland qualifies for the World Cup. And yeah, Evan Ferguson will be in the top three scorers in the Premier League. I still believe in him. And as for F Talent Show, we are back, we are alive, and we will be recording more often. So stay tuned.